Well, things have moved on. We have track. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie. A couple of weeks ago I made a video showing myself and a good friend of mine, Ian, refitting this board that I call board 1 and refitting the viaduct board back into the wall. It was somewhat entertaining. And in the comments section we were described as Laurel and Hardy, little and large, but I think the winners were the guys who decided we were the Chuckle Brothers, and it was an amusing video, and if you want to watch the whole thing there should be a link here. So where do I go from here now? Well, the tracks don't quite line up, so what I'd like to do is I'll show you the problem and then we'll crack on with some track laying. I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel. I noticed that actually only about 25% of my viewers do. And also, if you click the little bell icon, then you'll get a notification when the next video is released. If I firstly just take away this piece of scenery, hopefully you can see the point arrangement of the other side of the viaduct. So what I need to do now is just simply lay some track across the viaduct to join up over at this end with the tracks I've already laid. I'm not too sure if you can see from there, but the tracks actually are a little bit on the wide side, so what I'm going to have to do is remove those tracks by, I don't know, 6 inches or so, move the foam over very slightly and then refit them. And then just here there will be more of this Woodland Scenics foam coming on to link up, and hopefully I can get just 2 bits of track coming off the viaduct and then another 2 just to do the linking. So having lifted some of this track bed back so I can actually pull it in a little bit because it's a bit too tight against this retaining one. The last thing I'm going to do is start modifying that hillside. So I've lifted that up and I need to put a couple of packing pieces in here to lift this surface up level with the bridge. So to that end I've cut myself a couple of pieces of 1.5mm plastic card to go in there. So I shall just glue those in, and I'm using the old Woodland Scenics foam tack glue, and the reason for that, as you may have gathered in previous videos, is because it's a rubberized compound and it doesn't transmit sound apparently. So I shall put that in there, and of course the last thing you want to do is use PVA, which I think everyone knows it does transmit sound because it dries so hard. So we pop that one in there. And that's good, and I've pre-cut a couple of pieces of the foam track bed. That should go in kind of like that. We'll pull that bit around, and again with this piece here. So I shall do the same with those. And as it comes off the viaduct, I'm just starting to put the turn to pick up with those main lines coming through the curve. And then I shall weight these down, and once they're dry, come back and start laying some track. Before I lay the track, I thought it'd be best to tone down the green of this floor underlay. just in case we always lose a little bit of ballast. This is a children's ordinary water-based paint. And that's the paint from Hobbycraft. Ready mix paint, 300 millilitres. I think these are only sort of £2 or £3 a pop. So ideal for this sort of non-essential job. A couple of months ago, I produced a video called Speed Ballasting, which is all about ballasting quickly. Anyway, in that video, I did mention that rather than start spraying sleeper grime all over your layout when you can do damage to other bits, such as this back seam, if I was to start spraying around here, what I often do is take the track outside and spray it with sleeper grime prior to installation, just to minimise the risk of damaging other bits of the layout. And as is usual, I've soldered on the droppers, red and black, and I always put the black cable to the back of the layout, so black to the back, if that makes sense. And I soldered them on discreetly so you can't see it, and they both go on the inside and then straight normally through a hole. So that's what I do. So now I'll get on and glue these down, and hopefully then join up with the rest. And this is the paint in question. It's Rail Match Sleeper Grime 1406. Pretty good stuff. Best sprayed outdoors. I don't know if you've seen one of these before, but it's known as a Picot 6-foot weigh gauge. And the gauge works that these two lugs here fit into the tracks of set track and give you the right distances for the lines being apart, whereas for streamline they're a little bit closer. And I want to use this on the viaduct, but the viaduct's a bit narrow, so all I've done is cut the end off, and then this will give me the right distances for the tracks being apart all the way along. So that's my plan with that. There's the first track in, so now it's about time I laid a load of glue and then plonked them on kind of one after the other. So what I shall do is just put the glue on the viaduct section and then not glue these two bits, and then once this has gone off properly I can then manoeuvre these last the tails of these tracks to mate up with these bits. It kind of makes sense. On the ends of these points here, what I've done is I've put one metal fish plate on the outside rails and then an insulated fish plate on the inside rails. And the only reason I'm using an insulated fish point there is because I'm into block detection. And then you need that insulated fish plate to allow, to make sure you're sort of building your blocks as you go along. And one to go. Now with the rails in place, as I mentioned, that 6-foot way gauge, if I start here, and then you can manoeuvre the tracks to where they should be. So they come off the end of the viaduct completely parallel. Okay, so now all I need is the usual set of weights and we should be good to go. So while I'm waiting for that glue to dry, I thought we'd take a look where I'm going to put the station. And as I mentioned in a previous video, I wanted to curve it through here to avoid a kind of a boring straight station, so it had a bit more kind of interest to it. And what I have got is a stand-in bridge, which this isn't the one I'm going to use, but that's the one that's going to go to the branch line. And what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to mark out with this Woodland Scenics foam bed where one of the tracks is going to go, and then pin it with their foam nails, and then see what that looks like, and then run the other 3 tracks parallel with this one and see how it kind of looks and see if it fits. Of course, one of the important things is that actually, even though it's a curve, obviously to keep the coaches apart, because the last thing you need is to grind your coaches away running straight through the fast lines. Because this board had originally had the track mounted on the cork, I've left the cork on, which obviously makes it so much easier for these Woodland Scenic track pins to hold the foam down. Going straight into that ply board would be quite difficult. And then it's just a case of copying the other one, but to make sure you get the spacings right for the streamlined distances. Well, there we have it with the 4 track beds in place. And if I were to place these 2 Mark III coaches, which is the longest piece of rolling stock I've got, onto that track bed in the centre, you can see that there's sufficient gaps down there that these things are not going to collide with each other due to this bend. So I have the clearance, the sufficient clearance to stop them clashing. The centre gap, as it were, is bigger than the others. I always wanted a bigger one so I can put more stuff in there and sort of give it a different look so it wasn't too, what would you say, too uniform. So we've got, what have I done with it? So we've got the set track distances between the centre and then the streamline distances on the other 2 tracks, so it kind of makes sense, hopefully. I wanted the curved platform, but I'm also aware that if the curve is too tight, then coaches never look right, because you get this huge gap on the outward curve, as it were, between the centre of the coach and the platform. So this being quite a moderate curve, hopefully you shouldn't get that. And again, on the inside curve, where you can get the centre of the coach rubbing against the platform. And if it was a bit close, you'd never see it because you can't see that side of the platform unless I'm kind of filming from the other side. But again, I don't think that's going to be the case because this is such a gentle curve. Hopefully you kind of like the look of it. I think it's a bit more interesting than some straight sort of boring platform. And as I hinted this earlier, so this comes across, I have the replacement bridge, a single track bowspring bridge to go across here. And hopefully that will kind of add a bit more interest to the whole feel of it. So what am I going to do now? Well, I think I'm going to mark this out of where these track beds are, put a felt tip pen mark right through there. And I think the best thing to do then is to lay one of the tracks, lay one of the track beds down, and then take that as a datum, and from then I can build the other ones out to make sure everything's tickety-boo, and then probably bring the first track through and to make sure that the spacings are exact. I've also now laid in the two missing pieces of track that connect the viaduct up to the bend, and I like to use track setters across the joints, so as it dries you don't get kinks really, so hopefully that should work. Anyway, you can see that the glue's starting to go off, so what I'll do now is I'll run a couple of coaches around and see, just to check that it's smooth before it's too late to take them up. And to check the clearances, the best thing to do is if you put your leading edge of one coach against the centre of the other, and then that's the likeliest place that they're going to touch. And these are quite clear, and then yeah, it all runs quite well. Yeah, seemed pretty good. Quite pleased with that. There's a little bit of glue on the track. I was wondering what that noise was. And there's no rumble yet into the boards as you would normally because of this Woodland Scenics track bed. But obviously it's, you know, never really know until you've ballasted. I've now laid most of the foam, and hopefully you can see that just underneath here there's a piece of brown plasticard, and it's 1/2 millimetre thick, and that's because here we've got sort of 2mm cork, and to try to remove that step, I didn't really want to dig all this cork up, so by using this piece of plasticard I've kind of made a little step up, and we'll lose this final ridge, I think, when the track's down. So there's the 4 lanes up towards the other end, and so what I need to do now is obviously lay the track, but I think it'd be useful just to put a train down to see how much space we've got now that all this paint point work is in, and you can get a better look down the lines. So I've just laid the track in place on top of the foam, and obviously on that far track I've just brought out a warship with 8 coaches, and this will give me a better idea of actually how long these platforms can be. I was after an 8-coach train after all, but we could be a little bit tight. But then with these coaches disappearing off underneath the bridge at the far end, you'll get a perception that actually the platforms may well be longer than they appear because they're going to disappear out of view. And now from a lower angle you get a better perception of the way the station will look along its whole length. So what have I got to do next? Obviously these rails need to be glued down once they've got their droppers installed and then connected up to their relevant buses. The block detection question obviously comes about, because blocks will need to end around here at a set of signals for these 2 lines that are going off, and similarly for these 2 lines going up, their signals there will need to be able to hold trains until the signals turn green and allow them on their travels. So that's got to be thought about as we go on. I do like the idea of having the 8-coach train, so we'll see how that how that comes about. So once these are in, then I can think about sort of not necessarily putting the platforms in, but certainly building them and then offering them up as a template to see how it fits. But of course from here on we've now got to turn the corner and go down onto that next board. So there we go. I have these two rather long platforms left over from a previous layout, and I had thought of whether to dismantle these and then use these for the new ones, but I don't think I will. I'll use these perhaps in the station that I'm building for the branch line that goes around. So I'll just get some more of this Picot platform edging and rebuild the new ones. We'll take it from there. So that just about wraps up this video. So if you have any comments or whatever, then please let me know, as I say, down below. And in the meantime, I'd love to thank my patrons, because without your help, I really wouldn't be able to produce these videos or to spare the time. And please don't forget to subscribe, and there should be a video here and here, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.